This podcast and Iowa Public Radio are listener-supported. If you love listening to this podcast, consider joining the thousands of supporters who help keep it going. Donate now at ipr.org/donate.
This is Garden Variety, a horticulture podcast from Iowa Public Radio and Iowa State University Extension and Outreach. I'm Charity Nebbe. Iowa has turned green and lush over the past couple of weeks. All kinds of things are growing, including, of course, the grass in your lawn. Today, Adam Tomes is here to guide us through spring lawn care. Adam Tomes is an assistant professor of horticulture and turfgrass specialist at Iowa State University. Adam, hello.
Morning.
So I think the question everybody asks this time of year is, when do I mow?
Yeah.
How do I decide when it's time to mow?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a lot of people are mowing right now just to get kind of some of that dead leaf tissue off the plant. And that'll help green up the lawn, make it look green. If you're not as excited about that, then you would wait until it hits your desired height of cut and then go ahead and cut it. So realistically, for most lawns, that's probably the first week of May when it would actually grow based on temperatures we've had and are having. So, if you're not one that's active or want to get active in mowing yet, you've got a couple weeks yet.
Oh, that's nice to have a reprieve. Just review for us, when we do mow, how much of the blade do we want to cut?
Yeah, you never want to take more than 1/3 of the leaf blade at a time. And so just kind of balance that out. So if the yard gets to 4 inches, you'd cut it back to 3. It's about 1/3 of the plant there that you'd have removed. And so that would be the right height of cut. And remember, that first mowing of the year, there's a lot of stuff in the yard, from the winter. So there's rocks, tree branches, and so use your old mower blades for that first cut.
All right. Now, not everything is growing yet, although yesterday we had a summer day just plunked into the middle of spring, and that jumpstarts a lot of stuff. Is it still an opportunity to put down crabgrass pre-emergence?
Yeah, it's getting towards the end of the time, but definitely you still have a small window to do it. This weekend would be a good time to get it out and put it out before the temperatures next week really would promote crabgrass germination.
Okay, and it's going to be rainy this weekend. Does that complicate things?
Yeah, actually that's good. A light rain would be a really good thing for the yard with the pre-emerge, because that would put the pre-emerge where it's supposed to be in the soil, and it would activate it in the soil. And so, if you apply it and it rains 10 minutes after, or even a light mist while you're applying it, that's just fine. That'll get it where it needs to be and work the way you want it to.
All right. And of course, for many years, I talked with Dr. Nick Christians about corn gluten meal as a crabgrass controller. If that was an option that you wanted to use, is now the time to apply that?
Yeah, so corn gluten meal is a natural weed and feed type product, and so it's going to fertilize your yard and prevent crabgrass. Now is the time to do that as well. Again, it should be watered in as well, and so applying it with a little bit of moisture in the air would be a good thing, and immediately after would be good as well. All
right, and this is, of course, a good organic option. It does work. It works maybe a little more slowly than some of the chemical options, right?
Yep. If you're going to look at any kind of an organic or natural type control method, it's going to be a little slower than the synthetic options. And so it's something that you're going to want to commit to for a couple of years before you really see results. So, 2-3 years down the road, you should expect to see some performance out of it.
All right. And is it easy to come by at the Lawn and Garden Center?
It's fairly easy to be out there, and you can find it fairly easily, yeah.
All right. Now let's talk about spring fertilization, which is something that a lot of people do. First, is that something that you feel needs to be done?
Yeah. Fertilization for your yards, that helps green color. It helps thicken the yard. The best defense against weeds in a yard, if that's what you don't want to have, would be a thick, well-fertilized yard. And so that is something that's important. But we don't want you to get carried away either. So a lot of people think a little bit is good, a lot's better. That's not necessarily true. And so we want to have you put out, a 0.5 pound of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet over your yard. And then again, we'd like to see you use a slow release fertilizer as opposed to like a quick release products such as like urea.
All right. And let's talk about more best practices because, of course, when you go for a walk in the springtime, you will see fertilizer on the sidewalks. You'll see it on people's driveways. What do you feel is the best and most responsible approach?
Yeah, that drives me crazy when I see that. The fertilizer, apply it in the yard, and then when you get done, make sure that you're pushing any of the fertilizer prills that might have ended up out on concrete back into the yard. Well-fertilized yard and a thick yard is going to keep the fertilizer there on the yard where it's supposed to be. And so when you get done fertilizing, spend 5 minutes, walk around with a broom, or if you have a little blower, use that to make sure the prills get back into the yard where they're supposed to be.
And we just talked about pre-emergence for crabgrass, that having a little bit of rain to soak that into the yard is good. Tell me about watching the forecast when you put out that fertilizer.
Yep. So that's another weather-dependent practice. Again, a little bit of moisture at fertilization is fine. But, if it's going to be a large thunderstorm coming through, you really don't want to run out right in front of that and put that out because that's going to potentially release some of the nitrogen and it's going to go places that you don't want it to. The other thing, to think about as you look at fertilizer in the spring is a lot of Iowa soils have enough phosphorus in them for yards that are established. So you don't need to get that in your fertilizer mix. And so you could just stick to a nitrogen-based product.
And should you test your soil? Should you know what kind of quality you have in your yard?
Yeah, I'm kind of a lawn nerd, obviously, so I test mine. But yeah, you should do a soil test at least every 2 years. Would be a good thing just to kind of get a baseline if you need other nutrients. But, we never want you applying nutrients you don't need. And so a soil test every 2 years would generally give you a good view of what it should be.
All right. And, I know a lot of people, especially in newer homes, the soil quality in their yard is not great because the topsoil has been scraped off and people work hard over years to really rebuild that soil fertility. Can you do that with compost?
Yeah, that's a wonderful thing to add. Regular aerification and then compost top dressing to new developments and new yards is really a great way to do that. That's going to improve the soil health. That's going to improve the nutrients in the yard. And it's going to improve the performance of the grass in the yard. So that's a wonderful thing to do.
Tell me how it works when you say top dressing. What are you doing?
Yeah, so you're basically going out and poke a bunch of holes in the yard with an aerifier. So kind of make Swiss cheese of the yard. And then you'll come in and you'll get a load of compost dropped off somewhere in your yard or in your driveway. And then basically put it in a wheelbarrow, go out with a shovel and spread it around the yard and rake it in. Now, you want to have the grass blades poking up through the compost so you're not smothering the yard.
You could do a lot of damage if you don't.
You could. It's kind of like fertilizing, right? If a little bit's good, a lot's better. That's not necessarily the case here. So you want to have it where you can see the grass blades poking up through. And so a lot of times, like what I like to see people do is spread it and then rake through with like a stiff rake, and that will help allow the grass blades to come up. The compost kind of falls back down to that soil surface. And you might have to do this, a couple times. And a lot of places have rebates if you're applying compost to your yard, so you can get the compost for free.
Nice. And would you do this once a year for a few years, or what kind of a schedule would you do it on?
Yeah, I would look to do it yearly for a couple of years, and that'll just really build up the organic matter in that soil. It'll loosen it up so when it rains, the water actually goes down in. And, I would say 2 to 3 years when you're initially living there, and then you'll build up a nice layer.
When you apply it, do you need to stay off the lawn? It just seems like you could get muddy. Do you need to stay off the lawn for a little while?
Yeah, that's one of those things. It will have, some organic material at the surface of the yard. And so, if it rains, you're going to track a little bit of that in until it fills back in. But that grass, normally it really takes off after you do a compost application. And so within a week or two, you probably won't even notice. So I would say if you're having a garden party or a wedding in your backyard, maybe don't do that the week before that.
And does it matter what time of year you do it?
I would prefer you do it either in the spring or the fall, just because the conditions are a little bit better for the grass to recover quicker, fill back in. And then it's less stress on the yard as well than if you were to do it in the middle of the summer. So I would say, September, October, or, April, May is a good time to do it.
And would you possibly, if you're in an area where you feel like your soil really needs a lot of help, would you possibly do it spring and fall, or maybe once a year?
Yeah, I mean, you could do it up to twice a year if you feel like your soil's really terrible. And there are subdivisions that I've been in that I would agree with that. And that's just going to speed up the rate at which you can, recover your soil or make it kind of a healthier soil.
Sure. Now, of course, this time of year, as things are greening up, it's also a time where we learn a lot about our lawns and how they came through the winter. What are you seeing as far as how winter conditions affected our lawns this year?
Yeah, so I've gotten a lot of pictures from lawn care companies in eastern Iowa with lots of dead grass. And so different grass species like cold weather to different levels, just like people, I guess you would say. And so Kentucky bluegrass is more cold tolerant than, say, perennial ryegrass or tall fescue. However, a lot of people have moved to tall fescue, or they have more perennial ryegrass in their yards for whatever reason. And this winter, what happened was we got really cold. We didn't have snow cover to protect the grass. And so when those temperatures dropped way down, we had winter kill, especially over in Iowa City, Cedar Rapids, far eastern Iowa. And couple with that the fact that we had kind of a dry fall at the tail end. And so the grass was already under stress. Then it got really cold on it. And so it killed some lawns, or some areas of lawns at least.
All right. And of course, we always talk about the fact that the best time to seed is late summer. What do you do about those dead patches right now?
Yeah, so there's a couple things. Number one, we've had a relatively dry spring. And so it might not be greening up because of the fact that there just might not be enough moisture there to break it out of dormancy. So if you didn't get moisture last night, maybe get out your hose and water that area really good and see if it'll green up in the next couple of days to see if it just hasn't broke dormancy because of the fact it's been dry. If it doesn't do that, then you'll probably have to look at reseeding those areas. While it's not ideal, at least it's an option to get you some grass back in those spots.
All right. Adam Tomes, assistant professor of horticulture at Iowa State University, and obviously a turf grass specialist as well. For more gardening information and tips, please subscribe to our Garden Variety newsletter. You can find out more at iowapublicradio.org/garden. I'm Charity Nebbe. Garden Variety is a production of Iowa Public Radio and Iowa State University Extension. It's produced by me, Erin Stile, Caitlin Troutman, and the Iowa Public Radio talk show team. For more garden goodness, please subscribe to our Garden Variety newsletter. Just go to iowapublicradio.org/garden. I'm Charity Nebbe. See you next time.